All right, y'all, I want to do a personal story time about crying in front of a narcissist, but before I get into my story, I want to point out that there are a few ways that a narcissist might react to crying and a few different reasons why they react those ways. So first of all, narcissists use crying, they use their tears as a way to manipulate people, to play on your empathy. So when you're crying in front of them, they assume that you are using your tears to manipulate them, because narcissists assume that everyone thinks the way that they do. So they assume you're trying to manipulate them when you're crying. Another thing is narcissists hate to be held accountable, right? They don't like to say that they've done something wrong. They don't like to face the shame behind their poor behavior. So when you're sitting there crying in front of them, it highlights that they've done something wrong and they don't want to face that shit. But what I want to talk about in my story time is how narcissists lack empathy. And when you're crying in front of them, sometimes they don't know how to connect to that feeling, to that emotion that you're displaying. They don't understand it and they don't know what the to do. So that's why a lot of times you just might see them go silent or just have a blank stare. Sometimes they get angry, right? Like if it's about what I mentioned earlier, if they think you're trying to manipulate them. But sometimes they'll literally just sit there and go blank. So back to my story. There was this one time out of many when I was dealing with a narcissist that I dealt with, and he sent me over the edge one night. He was refusing to take accountability for what I was trying to discuss with him. He was shifting all the blame to me. He was making me feel crazy. He was being super disrespectful. He was just blowing my mind with the way that he was treating me and how cold he was being. And so I ended up crying naturally, and I was literally in a ball. I was like rocking, I was hyperventilating, and it got to the point where I couldn't even really get my cry out. Like it was like these high-pitched noises while I was trying to breathe. And when it got to that point, he was no longer like yelling at me. He was no longer saying anything. He was just sitting there like with this blank stare. This went on for, I'd say, around 10 minutes where I was sitting there like gasping for air, crying at the same time, and he was just sitting there. And then after a while, he was like, all right, well, I'm about to run to the hood real quick. I have to do this and that. Obviously, didn't give a at all, but it was also so weird. It was like he didn't understand and he wanted to get away from it. So the next day rolls around and he's acting like nothing happened the previous night. And I know some of y'all can probably relate to this. You get conditioned to act like nothing happened right along with them because you just want to get the good side of them back. So he was being super sweet that next day and we were having a good time together that night. And at one point he was like, baby, and he started cracking up to himself. And I'm like, what? I want to laugh too. And he was like, okay. Last night when you were crying, you sounded like a chipmunk. He was for real cracking up to himself about it. And I remember like thinking like, what the fuck? But then at the same time, I was like, well, hold on, tread lightly because you guys are on good terms right now. And so try to find the humor in this. I'm like, oh, you want to laugh? I'll laugh with you, like taking any breadcrumb that I could get. So I start cracking up with him about how I sounded like a chipmunk when I was crying. When you've gone through this extreme gaslighting and you're trauma bonded, you will latch on to any little breadcrumb, even if it's something that's like not right. If they're having a good time about it, you're like, oh shit, I want to be a part of that. I want to get the good side of you. Yes, let's laugh about it together. Shit's fucking crazy. But anyway, what was your experience with crying around a narcissist?